I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House.
And I'm Devyn Caldwell from Our Philly Row. And we're the hosts of True Tales from Old Houses.
Hi, Devyn.
Hey, Stacy, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, things are good. Not much to report here. What's been happening at your house?
Not too terribly much. We're getting our backyard a little further along and spending a lot more time in the back.
I noticed you've been posting some pictures on in your Instagram stories, and it looks really inviting back there. You spend a lot of time there, I suppose.
Yeah, I will admit that the photos are carefully composed. It's not quite as inviting as they look. However, it's getting closer, and I'm excited about it.
Right. Is that a project you think you're going to finish this season, or is it going to be kind of ongoing from summer to summer?
I think it's going to be something that every year we're going to add more. So right now I have some new planters, and they're beautiful, but there's no plants in them. So
you still don't have plants?
No. In the next few weeks, I hope to have plants in them, and then, but nothing like fancy, just something for the rest of this year. And then next year we have some bigger plans, and I'll probably put some more permanent plants and such in. Just glad to be able to have water back there to water the plants.
Right. Am I going to have to get in my car and drive to Philadelphia and bring you plants?
No, but the logistics are not quite as simple.
It sounds so simple, right? Right? Do we make it complicated? Is it really complicated?
Perhaps, but it's a very tiny yard. So anything you do, you have to think about where you put stuff. And
sure.
So.
Yeah. No, I have no business talking like that because I have some hydrangeas out there in pots that I was supposed to put in the ground early June, and they're still sitting there. So I'm definitely making it way more complicated than it has to be. I blame myself for that. Yeah, and I don't have a whole lot to report here as far as what's going on in the house. I'm still working in my daughter's room. I guess that's the main thing. I'd really like to get her back in her room. She's in the guest room, so we don't have a guest room right now. And I'd really just like to get her room finished so she can go back in there because the guest room is starting to smell like a locker room.
As they do with teenagers, right?
Yeah, right. I always tease her. She went out and she got some candy the other day, and I said, "Oh, this room smells like candy and laundry." Anyway, she can't listen to this episode because I don't want her to know I'm talking about her. But no, she's a lovely, lovely child. And she's really helping. She's helping a lot with her room, which is wonderful. It's kind of fun to be at that stage where the kids are helpers, not helpers in quotes, where you...
Right, where they actually have input and they actually do help. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
There are days when I go to her and I say, okay, so we should paint this today. And I keep expecting her to do this, just because a teenager. Yeah, not because she's this way, but I keep expecting her to kind of be like, oh, I don't want to do it today, or I'm busy or something. But she is always just right there, like, I'm ready. Let's go do it. And
that's awesome.
It's such a pleasure. Yeah, it's really neat. I kind of feel like maybe my parenting's paying off. Of course, now that I said that, I'm not going to take all the credit for that.
Well, she's not your first, so you've kind of done the parenting thing a little bit now.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Listen to me like pat myself on the back. I'm such a good parent. This is all me. But those nights when they break curfew and they don't listen to me, that is so not me. That is definitely their father. No. Usually we do announcements right now, but we don't really... I don't really have anything to announce. Do you?
No, I don't really either. It seems like with the shutdowns and everything, that there's just not a lot going on, unfortunately.
No, I feel like 2020 is still canceled.
In some ways. But to our listeners, if you guys have events that you're aware of that are coming up over the next couple of months, July and August, September, please feel free to let us know. You can go to our website, True Tales from Old Houses, and there's a place where you can send us a message and let us know.
Right, absolutely. And we're happy to announce your preservation function or workshop, whether it's Zoom or in person, whatever. We would be happy to announce that on the show so that more people will know about it and attend if possible.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we could make up some stuff to talk about, I suppose, but since we don't really have anything else, should we move to Q&A?
Sure.
Okay. I like that we're doing this now. It's really fun to answer these questions. I think in the beginning, before you and I knew each other very well, we sometimes actually struggled to come up with things to say to each other. So yeah.
It was a little rough in the beginning. Yeah, in the beginning it was a little rough. But, I think so first of all, to our listeners, we don't reveal our answers to each other until we do the recording.
Right.
And that's purposeful because we really want them to come from our heart and what we really feel, and not because we've rehearsed this together.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We don't believe in rehearsals, actually.
And it shows.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. There you have it. All right. Do you want me to ask the question this week, or do you want to ask it?
I'll ask the question and you answer first. How's that?
Oh, okay. All right. Gotcha.
Okay. So the question is, if you lived on the West Coast, would you still seek out an old house to live in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. I mean, this one I could answer with one word, but since I'm me, I'll elaborate a little. The answer is yes. However, when we're talking about, these pre-war houses, they don't exist as much out there. And if we're talking strictly West Coast, not just out West, then they're very cost prohibitive for someone like me. So there's a chance that even though that's what I would want and that's what I would be seeking, it's highly likely I wouldn't be able to afford it. Now, I did live in a house before I moved here that was 1960s. And so by the technical definition, that is an old house. And I loved that house. I really enjoyed that house. So that would probably be more in my price range. So I would probably be embracing the mid-century life more so than the really old house life. But if I could, absolutely, that's what I would look for. How about you?
Well, the answer is also yes. But like you, there's something to preface it. The thing about the West Coast is that, and looking at this question, I had to go and look something up on Google last night. The population of the state of California in 1880 was still around 100,000 people, which is, I'm correct myself, 500,000 people.
Okay. 100 seemed really low.
Yeah, it was okay. About 500,000 in 1880. But the population of the city of Philadelphia in 1880 was also about 500,000 people. So you got to think about how so much more was concentrated in such a small area. And so everything in California is so new. So you don't have colonial homes. You don't have like early, Greek revival homes or Federalist homes. That said, you still have amazing Victorians. And, I think nothing says classic California from earlier years than the bungalow. The California bungalow.
I was just going to say the bungalow.
Yeah, they're so adorable, and there's so many varieties of bungalows, and those homes were really, really well built. I would shift my focus from probably 19th century houses to early 20th century houses, and probably put the cutoff around the Depression, anything pre-Depression. And those are still out there. You're right that it can be very, very expensive, but I think there's still neighborhoods in certain cities where they can still be picked up if you don't need a big house. If you want a small house, that's still possible. But there's also some amazing mid-century stuff in California and Oregon, Washington, the whole West Coast, Arizona, that almost is non-existent on the East Coast. So there's that opportunity as well.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And if I ended up on the West Coast, it would probably be somewhere in Oregon, if I had to make a guess. I like California. I loved California, but I'm not sure I would go back. I'm
actually a native Californian who has not lived. Yeah, I have not lived there since the late 80s. I left as an adult, and I go back to visit, but that's about it. Yeah, you and I basically crossed paths. I went from the Midwest to California. You went from the California to the Midwest, to Chicago, right? Right. Chicago, yeah, I was there for 8 years, and then I was in New York for 10, and then here in Philly. I remember when I went to Chicago, I met people who had never been to California before, and that just seemed so strange to me. Right. And everybody thinks you're a surfer if you live in California or you live near the ocean. That's so true. And I do not have blonde hair, and I do not know how to surf. Yeah, no. The ocean is loud. It's beautiful, but I don't want to surf in it. It is beautiful. I don't find it as restful as some people find the ocean. But mountains, give me mountains any day, all day. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Today's guest is a longtime blogger. He got his start as a self-taught decorator in his first little apartment in New York City.
His design ideas and humorous writing style quickly took hold, and it didn't take long before thousands of people were looking forward to his regular blog posts.
Flash forward 10 years, and he's now living in the Hudson River Valley, where he spends his days removing bad renovations from perfectly good houses and creating beautiful, timeless designs out of supplies that many people would send to the landfill.
He does all of this with humility and his signature self-deprecating humor. And he does it with such charm that we can't help but root for him, no matter what kind of mess he gets himself into. It is our absolute pleasure to welcome Daniel Kanter.
My name is Daniel Kanter. I started a blog about 10 years ago called Manhattan Nest to share the DIY projects that I was doing in my little city apartment. And then everything changed in 2013 when I took a big leap of faith and bought an 1865 Greek revival in Kingston, New York. I've been restoring that house ever since. And in that time, I've also designed and GC'd several other renovations in the area. And I'm currently in the process of completing a gut rehab of a condemned little old house just down the street from mine. And I still try to share as much as I can about the process on both my blog and on Instagram.
Thank you so much for being here. And I was so pleased that you said yes. And it's very exciting to both Devyn and I to have you here on True Tales from Old Houses in season 4. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
I don't think you can possibly be more excited than we are, Daniel.
I don't know.
First of all, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you here. So my first question is going to be, how did you come to fall in love with old houses?
I'm honestly not really sure. I grew up, I guess, with sort of an interest and fondness for antiques. Like, I was that weird kid that my mom would take me to this antique fair that happened in like a strip mall parking lot on Sundays. It was like my favorite thing to do on the weekend. And I think that sort of just grew larger in scale into houses. And I feel like kind of my entry to all of this was back in like 2005 or 6. The Washington Post did an article about this new website called houseblogs.net. And it was all about, it was like a collection of bloggers that were all renovating old houses. And it was basically kind of like an RSS before we had that.
Right.
And so I just got really into like all of these blogs, and some of those people are now my friends, which is really funny. But
Cool.
Yeah, I just loved all of it. I was like 15 and like reading about roughing an electric, and just, I want to do that someday.
So just a quick chronological order. Let's start with your, not too long, but just you had an apartment, right? An old apartment in New York City. And then tell us the progression of how you are now in your home.
I moved to New York City for college. I went to NYU, and I lived for a year in the dorms. And as me and my roommate sort of decided to move off campus, I thought it would be real funny to start a blog about my first apartment. And so that's what I did. And then I moved to the Upper East Side of Manhattan, which sounds ritzy at the time, was it was really lame. It was really boring. We were way on the East Side. There was just nothing like fun to do. And so that made me real invested in the apartment because I didn't have anything better to do. Also, I was really close to all these thrift stores, which was amazing. And so stayed there a year. Then I moved to Brooklyn to a much more beautiful apartment in need of a lot more work. And I'm the lunatic tenant that will actually do that kind of work just because I sort of like it and I want to live in a nice place. And, we couldn't afford like a super nice apartment. So was there a couple of years and then came up to Kingston, New York for a weekend and just like kind of fell in love and looked at, I think Zillow or something. And the very first house that popped up was this house around the corner from where we were staying. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's beautiful. And so we drove by the next day and sort of peeked in the windows, and I'm just like completely fixated on this house. And then, long story, semi-shorter, a few months later, we put in an offer, really low ball offer. Never thought they'd take it, and they took it. And a few months later, closed on the house. That was just over 7 years ago.
I think a lot of us, when we are traveling, tend to look at local real estate to see what there is because we're always so curious.
Oh, for sure. One of the first things I do within the first couple days is pick up a realtor or look online or something like that, or peek in the windows of the local realtor. But so do I understand that you kind of went from I'm fine in my apartment to now I'm buying a house in Kingston in just a very, was there like any in between there? Were you already thinking you wanted to move out of the city?
No, in fact, I was with someone at the time, and our original concept was to, I don't know, spend like a year kind of getting the house up to snuff, and then we would rent the house like Airbnb or something and probably come up on weekends. And we had this whole scheme, and pretty quickly, every Sunday night just was so sad that we had to leave and go back to the city, and I never wanted to. And then the relationship ended up ending, and so he went back to the apartment in Brooklyn, and I stayed in the house.
And here you are.
7 years later, yeah. And I'm still working on the house. The whole fix it up in a year did not exactly come to pass.
Yeah, I think we're all there, right there with you.
Yeah. You guys get it.
Yeah, I don't think there's an end, do you? There's not an end to this process.
Absolutely not. You circle back. I've already circled back without even getting to the finish of redoing rooms that I already did. It's endless.
You have, but you've done much better. You have redone those rooms, and then they've come out even better than they were before. And you've repurposed rooms. I remember you had your office, which then became your laundry room, which I think it still is your laundry room.
Mm-hmm. That's not changing.
I was doing a little catch up on the blog last night. I started seriously following you like right after you moved to Kingston, but I also remember the Fodenza. I have fond memories of that because I did a Fodenza in my apartment in New York City. I had the idea, but you had the name.
No, I didn't. I did not coin Fodenza. That credit goes to Anna Dorfman at Door 16. And at the time, because we were friends already, she was like, I'm going to call it a Fodenza. And she looked it up on Google, and there were no results. And so we were like, this is great. And then like a year later, there's like over 1 million results or something. Yeah. It's her legacy.
So for people who are listening who don't know what a Fodenza is, can you explain that?
Yes, I'd love to. A Fodenza is a bank of cabinets that are hung on the wall, but at like a credenza height. So the classic Fodenza is IKEA kitchen cabinets, which are incredibly versatile. Now they make the wall cabinets with drawers, but at the time they were just doors. But tons of storage, really cheap. You can wrap it in wood or just make a nice top for it or whatever. I have installed so many Fodenzas at this point. I feel like almost every freelance job I ever had involved a Fodenza somewhere. One of them involved like 4. Yeah.
Very useful.
Very useful. They store a ton. Easy to accomplish.
That's funny. All right. So actually talking about changing rooms and redoing projects brought me to something I've been thinking about, is that you are a wonderfully imaginative, you're a free spirit, right? I would call you a free spirit.
I like that I get that impression.
There have been these moments where on your blog or anywhere where you're like, oops, I just removed the side of my house. Oops, sorry. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, do you always have the plan in mind? And as you're dismantling, you're thinking, okay, I see where this is going. Or do you just think, you know what, I'm just going to tear it up and it will come to me later? Like, how much of a free spirit are you versus how much of a planner are you?
So the side of the house is actually a great example. So for, I guess for the people listening, I had 2 additions on the side of my house that were quite old, but not original to the house. And I tore them off a few years ago, which ended up involving putting windows where there hadn't been windows and removing these additions and trying to replicate a really ornate bay window. I had to like completely redo one side of it. And so I think that's a good example because I knew more or less what I wanted it to look like. I did sort of eyeball certain things like the day of, like exactly where the kitchen windows were going to fall. So I knew like conceptually what it was going to be. I knew mostly process wise what it was going to be. And then there were certain things like that third side of the bay window that I didn't quite know how I was going to accomplish, but sort of figured if I just kept kind of nailing things to other things, it would be fine. And like I decided like really last minute, like the front of my house and the back of my house where the kitchen is, it seemed to have been built as 2 separate structures. I'm not sure like how much older the main house is. Anyway, I made the creative liberty decision to like drop a big wide corner board between the 2 structures to sort of articulate that was an addition. And I think it ended up being really effective. So like, I think my approach to projects is sort of general concept, and then the specific, like I try to just stay sort of agile and not get too tied to one thing and let the specifics work themselves out.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So from my perspective, or from my point of view, just reading your blog, it was kind of, went from a project and then all of a sudden I'm reading, I'm like, oh, he's tearing off his house. So did you think about, obviously you think about it. Nobody just tears their house up. But I'm just curious, like, were you standing in your yard going, you know what, today is the day to start tearing it up? Or do you kind of plan in advance and think about it? Or do you just kind of follow what your heart tells you?
Well, in that case, a few different things went into that decision. So it was partially because without taking care of some of these like structural and fenestration issues, I couldn't do a ton more with the interior of the house until that kind of stuff was addressed. So that was part A. Part B was that I was finishing up this really, really long, intense freelance project. And we were kind of at the point at the end where like you're waiting for orders to come in and like things are sort of slow but coming together, and I was really trying to not lose the contractors. So basically I was like, come work at my house a couple days and then we'll bot back to the job and then we'll work at my house a couple days. And before I knew it, the side of my house had been torn off. And because that project was so long, like I was so just like antsy to really get back to my house. I think one thing that I didn't appreciate when I kind of started all of this was I really can't effectively do 2 big projects at once. Logistically, it doesn't work. I'm exhausted.
Right.
Tools are somewhere else. It just doesn't pan out. So I was really itching to get something done. And then it ended up being like, oh, wait, I'll just rebuild the house, basically.
Right. And then you were stuck with a hole in the side of your house and you had to do something with that, right?
Yeah, just little details. Like, yeah.
Right.
Just.
I love that about you, though. I really love following your projects for that reason, because it looks like, you take it to shambles and then you bring it back to such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I it's hard to show people all those steps. And I think it's really honest of you to do that, because so many people gloss over the details of, they're really big into the afters, but not so much the befores or the in-betweens.
Yeah. Yeah. I really try to, I think I'm a better DIYer than I am a designer. So like, I love a good before and after, but I think it's a more projective thing to put into the world of the step by step and, not I think we're surrounded by things that sort of sugarcoat renovations and make them look easy and fast and affordable, and they are none of those things. And I think having some honesty about that and, good humor, because at the end of the day, you just have to laugh about it.
Right, right. The people who read your blog and follow you on Instagram, they're incredibly, how would I say that? They're incredibly invested in your choices. And so I'm curious, what is probably the most controversial decor choice that you've made over the years?
Oh, my.
Good question.
Oh, my. There have been so many. Oh, goodness. Painting my fence black was weirdly, we call it Commentroversy.
Commentroversy? Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I like that.
That's great.
It's a trade term, That was bad.
What about painting a garage black?
That was also maligned by certain folks.
Yeah.
This recent kitchen I'm doing, what usually happens is people will raise a lot of eyebrows. They won't really tell me until later, generally, and then they'll be like, I really did not understand what you were doing when you chose that, but now I really like it, like now that I see it. So recently that was beige paint for cabinetry, but the kitchen before that was this green square tile that very few people seem to like, right off the bat, but when it was all done, it
was beautiful.
Seemed to have liked it. Thank you.
Well, I just want to go on record as saying I'm team beige kitchen all the way, and I have never questioned that once.
Yes, you're my people.
And brown grout.
Brown. I still can't believe those words.
Two together, brown and grout.
Oh my God. It sounds so wrong. That beige color, I color matched off of like a, original layer of paint in my house. So it does have a basis.
Right. I often wonder, you and I live in similar climates, and I'm not sure that everyone across the USA or the world, you have more than that, understand exactly how long winter is for us. So sometimes when I'm picking colors or when I'm choosing things, I'm going for warmth. And so beige automatically, I'm like, that's great. You have to kind of fake that warmth because we are so cold and snowy and icy for months out of each year. So I don't know if you base any of your decisions on that, but anytime someone chooses beige over like a really cold gray, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm very, very bad at like following trends and knowing what's happening outside
That's good. That's not a
my
bad
world.
It's not a bad thing at all.
I think what I've sort of gathered from what people have said is that warm tones are they're back in action. We're sort of leaving behind the cool grays, which I'm all about. I'm sitting in my closet right now, and like this color on the trim could not be more like putrid, beigey yellow, kind of poopy, and I just love it so much. Like, these old timey colors. I just do it to piss people off at this point, I think. And
that's funny.
Stacy, let's pause for a moment and tell people how they can support the podcast.
Right, because there are several non-monetary ways to support True Tales from Old Houses.
You can tell a friend or your local historical society, basically anyone who loves old houses, about the show.
You could share us on social media. As you're listening to an episode, take a screenshot and share it with your friends and followers.
You can also leave us a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We say it all the time because it's true. Those ratings and reviews help people find us and let them know that this show is worth a listen.
Now, those are non-monetary ways to support the show, and if you're able, you may show us some love with a one-time or reoccurring donation over on the website truetalesfromoldhouses.com. If you donate in the $20 to $25 range, we will send you an awesome coffee mug with the True Tales from Old Houses logo on it as a thank you gift. Your generosity in all ways keeps the show afloat, and we appreciate it so much.
Have you considered writing a book? And if you did, what kind of topic would you do?
I've thought about it. I mean, it feels like a real pipe dream. I guess the few times that I've sort of talked to like a literary agent or publisher, I don't know. It seems like they want kind of a DIY book. I don't really see the appeal in that, I feel like, because I sort of feel like that's what the blog is for, and that's what I do there. And so if I were going to write a book, I think I would want it to be more kind of reflective, not quite a memoir, but really about this whole thing of renovating this house and having to do it alone when that was never the plan, and all these, really weird missteps and places that my occasionally impulsive decisions have brought me to. and so I think that could be a fun thing to write. But yeah, I don't really want to write like a how-to book.
Well, I think a DIY book would be awfully hard because so much of it is in the moment problem solving. So you can kind of explain to people, look, here's the general idea of how to do something, but it's probably not going to look exactly like this when you get into your own project, making it difficult to write a book.
Right.
Totally. Like I tried to I added a fireplace to my bedroom, like totally fake. It's just a mantle with the sun. Like it looks legit.
It looks great.
Thank you, Devyn. But I tried to write it like how to, but it's like, well, you have to find an old mantle first. So that's going to be different for everyone. And then you have to find a summer cover, and that's going to be different for everyone. And then your wall is going to be weird. And so you have to fit, like, it just ended up being like, it can be done. You just have to sort of keep messing with it until you solve the riddle. And
right.
A lot of your projects are they're so one-off in what you're doing that you can't really apply them in other situations, which it makes them unique and special. But that's kind of the challenge, is it's like, oh, here's how I did this, but you're going to be doing it very, very differently than I will because of your circumstances in your house and such. And by the way, it's just your house. I love your house so much. One of the things about your house that I love the most is how the baseboards become the door casings. Every time I see a photo, I'm just like, oh, I don't know. That's one thing I love the most. And then your staircase just came out so beautifully. For our listeners, Daniel finished the restoration of his staircase, and it was a huge project. Mine's also an undertaking which I have barely touched.
Thank you. Yeah, it feels really different. Yours, I think, is more challenging. I hate to tell you.
You may be right.
It's two flights, right? Yes,
it is. It's a 3-story house. So it's 2 flights, and it zigzags back and forth.
God bless you. You're going to have a whole bunch of fun. Yeah, I think, thank you. I think like 4 things kind of sold me on the house. One was absolutely the moldings. I had never seen and still haven't seen moldings done that way. I just think they're beautiful and special. That it had nearly every original window.
I love that.
Yeah.
I know you do. And every door except for one, which I've since found curbside, a perfect door that'll work. So yeah, I'm very lucky to have this intact house and just kind of get to polish it up while also tearing it to pieces.
I'd love to get some pictures of those things. We can put them on the show notes. Well, I do want to say something that I really admire about you is that you are unapologetic about your mistakes, and you're honest about your abilities and when you get in over your head. And there was kind of a moment in time, and I think a lot of us were really worried about you. Maybe you took things a little bit too much to heart. Like things were really hard for you for a while. And number one, we're glad to see you back and happier or whatever you perceive what I perceive as happiness. But also, has that been a problem for you do you feel a certain pressure to present yourself a certain way? It doesn't seem that way, but knowing that you felt sad for a while about things made me question that. Maybe are you too hard on yourself sometimes?
Maybe. I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I don't think I feel a pressure to present myself a certain way. I think, kind of going back to not wanting to like sugarcoat the process of renovation. Like, I think it's just as much emotional and personal as it is financially straining or anything else. So I've tried to be pretty open about, struggling with mental health issues like crippling anxiety, depression, and because I was 23 when I bought this house and very much had not figured that stuff out. And so, yeah, there have been some really dark moments, like tearing off the side of the house, very exciting project, but took a really long time to finish, and also just really wrecked the house for a while. Mm-hmm. And ended up being a lot more expensive than I thought. So at the end of it, it was like I didn't have a kitchen anymore. I basically didn't have any money. I couldn't get a plumber to come out to the house. I didn't have hot water for like 6 months. Like everything was just really bad. And of course, like just mentally, I wasn't in a super functional place. So I, didn't keep pounding the plumber. I just sort of was like, this is hard, and I'll just take cold showers, I guess, and, wash dishes in the yard. So it's been difficult, but mood stabilizers are a beautiful thing.
I put you on the spot. Are you okay with that going on the podcast?
Oh, yeah, totally.
I want to add that there are mental health issues within my family. So for me, it's really important to talk about it, be honest, because it's how we face them here in my immediate family. And it took a while to get there. So I appreciate your honesty. So a lot of times I ask these questions and I think, okay, I don't feel like I couldn't answer these questions, but to put you on the spot, I didn't want it to make you feel
No, I don't mind at all. And I think it, in some ways is, regardless of whether you struggle with mental health issues, it's an emotionally challenging process, I think. And, you sacrifice a lot of like leisure time. I think I imagine I would have if I wasn't renovating a house for 7 years. For me, that meant, that was my 20s. I spent a whole bunch of it renovating a house instead of, I don't know, whatever 20-year-olds do. And yeah, it's hard on relationships. It's hard.
Right. On Instagram and online in general too, there's sort of this ideal that you have to kind of keep up this almost toxic positivity. And so I like the realness that this is hard. Not everybody enjoys themselves all the time doing this. It is not always sunny and rosy, and there's swearing involved here.
Just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't really like doing most of this work. What I like is having done it and getting to live with it or getting to transform it for somebody else. But there's very few parts of the process that I really truly enjoy doing, which might surprise people. I don't know.
No, doesn't surprise me. It really doesn't. I mean, I think we keep moving forward because as if you're a goal-oriented person, or if you're, like you said, you're the person who really appreciates living in the after, and that kind of keeps us working through those really boring, mindless tasks, that are repetitive things that are required to accomplish these jobs.
I think it teaches you a lot about patience too. Like, and I think that's something I've been able to apply to other areas of my life where, you're not going to finish a project in a weekend. It's just not going to happen. So, but what you can do is take some steps forward, and those are steps toward, progress. And it's all, as long as you kind of keep moving, it'll get there eventually. The only way it doesn't is if you give up and stop. And so, one foot in front of the other.
So do you think you're living in your forever house? Do you imagine yourself in another house one day?
It would have to be a pretty great house. I really like my house. I think it would be extremely hard to leave. I love Kingston. I like, the area of town that I live in. So at the same time, there are some pretty spectacular houses around that sometimes I'm like, okay, I could maybe be swayed. I think I will be here a very long time.
Right. Well, you're getting really involved in your community now, too, which is nice.
Yeah. Should I talk about it?
If you want to.
Sure.
Yeah. So I will try. So a couple of years ago in October, the city council authorized the creation of a land bank, which I didn't really know what it was. I understood that it had something to do with basically fixing up the city-owned tax foreclosed properties. And I thought to myself, I don't want to see a bunch of really bad Home Depot renovations all around town. So I guess I'll throw my hat in the ring and see what I can do to make sure these houses get preserved. First board meeting comes and nobody wanted to be a board chair. So I raised my stupid hand. And so for close to 2 years now, I've been chairman of the board of the Kingston City Land Bank and been able to build this organization from the ground up and really learn a lot more about what land banks actually do, which is typically not a bunch of redevelopment of real estate, but it is about stabilizing the structure, clearing title, selling to income eligible buyers with certain covenants that the property remain affordable. So yeah, it's really cool work where we are supposed to buy our first 5 properties actually at the end of this week. And we got a big grant from New York State to redevelop those properties. I'm not there doing the work, but I am going to be involved in some of the design decisions and creating a set of historic standards for how the land bank undertakes our renovations. And at the end of the day, there's going to be a family living in these houses that have just sat vacant and falling apart for years. And so, it's really exciting and hopefully a productive way to give back a little, because God knows I spend enough time on myself.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm glad you told us about that, because I was very unfamiliar with exactly your involvement in your community, other than the fact that you were. And I love this idea of focusing on the structure and the historic aspects of these houses, but likewise not letting them become so expensive that people can't afford them. And I think that's so wonderful.
Right, exactly. So we'll be selling below market generally, and there's certain legal mechanisms that you can use to preserve affordability long term. So we'll be kind of using all the tools in the toolkit to kind of help not have people get displaced. That was such an awkward way to phrase that. But we've had the real estate market has really, really changed here just since I've lived here. And so displacement is a big issue. There's a shortage of housing, and there's 40, 50 city-owned houses that could be put back on the tax rolls if somebody was doing something. And so that's what I'm doing.
I think that's fantastic. What's the population of Kingston?
Kingston itself is about 25,000, but it's sort of the biggest little city in the area. So it becomes sort of a hub. And what's funny is like there's an area sort of on the edge of town that's like there's a Lowe's and a Home Depot and a Walmart and a Sam's Club and the list. And so that's what most people from the area that have been here a long time like think of Kingston as, is like where the mall is. And they don't even really know that there's this amazing historic uptown area, which is where New York became a state. The New York State Constitution was ratified like 3 blocks from my house. It's a really cool spot that has seen a lot of redevelopment in the past like 10 years. There's a pretty rocky economic history in Kingston, but right now it's doing quite well. But of course that exacerbates some of these housing issues.
Right, exactly.
So what are your plans for Bluestone Cottage once it's completed?
Oh boy, that is a tough question, because it will basically depend on the market, I think. I would like to sell it. That's always been the intention. The really cool thing about having the blog and this thing that I can make money just through the process of renovating it. So even if I just break even on the house, but it's being owner occupied and it's loved and cared for, I feel like that's a win. But yeah, it's kind of a tough block. The house was $19,000. So, it's hopefully worth much more than that now, but I'm not positive it's gonna come in at a price that will make sense to sell it right away. So it might be an Airbnb for a while. It might just be a regular rental. I'm honestly not sure.
You're doing an amazing job, though.
Thank you. Yeah, just finished the kitchen. My feeling about it is like, I don't really subscribe to the idea that you should try to make everything as kind of generic as possible to quote unquote appeal to the most people. Like you can't, I feel like that's what lands you with something that actually doesn't appeal to anyone. It just sort of is like neutral and non-offensive. So yeah, I just don't think about it that much. We'll see where the numbers fall and the timing, and hopefully I can pass it along to somebody else.
So for people who aren't familiar, Bluestone Cottage is close to the house that you live in, right? And you bought it separately and you've been working on it. For a couple years at least, 2 or 3 maybe?
Just a couple, yes, sure.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's been like 5.
Oh, okay. With all sincerity, I understand like how much it would take, and it didn't even... When you say 5 years, I don't even bat an eyelash, but...
Yeah, I mean, it feels... that was another thing that maybe could have been thought through a little bit better, but...
No apologies necessary. You don't have to explain yourself.
You live and you learn. It's funny, it's a little tiny house, but it's hard to renovate a very small house like that. There's just so many weird challenges that don't exist in big normal houses with basements and stuff.
Right.
The last thing I want to ask you about is burnout. How do you handle dealing with burnout? Because I know it happens at times.
Deny it. Bury it deep down. I think I try to take a little bit of time between projects to sort of reset. I think that's valuable. I try to kind of stagger bigger projects with smaller ones so that not everything is like a year process. Like some things you can get done in a couple weeks and they'll be nice. So yeah, like right now, I just finished the kitchen over at the cottage, and the next day sat in bed, watched like a British miniseries from 2011, some like Nova special. I read Marie Kondo's book, Life-Changing Magic of Tidying or something.
Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up,
read it
yes.
Cover to cover. I subcategorized the categories. And so for about a week now, I've just been on a tear through the house, just purging and setting things aside to donate.
Folding your underwear into tiny little squares.
Oh my God.
Okay, you can't see this on a podcast, but he's just showed us a tiny little square of his underwear.
It is so
I love
tiny.
it. I love it.
Yeah, like little pastries. Yeah, but that's just been such a cathartic, like amazing thing. It's not like a renovation project, but it is like kind of this breath at the end of quite a few years of pretty intense back-to-back projects. So yeah, I guess that's how I handle burnout.
All right. Well, I guess the last thing I'd like to do is ask you, is there anything else that you would like to share with us or tell us, or that you would like people to know about you?
No, I don't think so. I'm a big fan of both of yours. The podcast is great. I'm honored to be included. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the thoughtful questions. It's lovely.
Oh gosh. Yeah, trust me, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll come back anytime.
Oh, excellent.
It's just been really a pleasure to have you as a guest.
Thank you. And it's great to see you looking spry and healthy, and
thank you.
Your skin is luminous.
I'm sitting in front of a window.
whatever you're doing, it's working.
It does thrill me to have Devyn. I feel like Devyn's 100%. You know, he was sick for so long. Sorry, Devyn, to talk about you.
It's okay.
But you were sick for a while, and then you were back like in a percentage of time. And so it feels like this season 4 is like a really nice, fresh start. Having Devyn back full time, we've kind of got our act together as much as we possibly can for a homegrown podcast, and we are moving forward.
And my voice is finally starting to come back.
You sound great.
I guess, unfortunately, I hate to end this because I enjoy talking to you so much, and I could probably do this for about, another hour or so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the show today. We hope you enjoyed it. For more information about this episode, including show notes and transcripts, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
Bye for now.